DaVo here from the Axiom Body Piercing Studio in Des Moines, Iowa, located inside Skin Kitchen Tattoo. And in this video, how to size jewelry in different jewelry types. When it comes to sizing jewelry, we talk about two different things. The first thing being the gauge, or the thickness of the jewelry. The second thing being the width of the jewelry. The gauge is the thickness of the jewelry, and it's based on the American Standard Wire Gauge, which is most commonly you see these tools used to measure that. And basically it's based on the thickness of the jewelry. It's used in a lot of different wiring, electric situations or electronic situations. It's also used a lot with sheet metal and various other things. It is kind of complicated, well, not really kind of complicated, but kind of confusing that the larger the number, the thinner the jewelry is. For example, a lot of posts that you'll get at cheap places at the mall, like for your stud jewelry, is sometimes going to be as high or as thin as 24 or 22 gauge. Most body piercing jewelry, on rare occasions you might see something as thin as 20 gauge, but most of it is 18 to 12 gauge that is pierced with. The reason why it's so thick is a couple of different reasons. First off, we want to reduce the amount of the likelihood. First, we want to reduce the likelihood of the piercing, if it gets caught or receives some type of abuse, getting ripped or torn through the tissue. The other reason that we take into account when it comes to picking out gauge is that we want something that is light enough that it's not going to cause rejection or make it easier for your body to push it out. That said, most commonly, most piercings are done, like facial piercings, upper ear piercings, or ear piercings, unless you specifically ask for it, is usually done in either 18 or 16 gauge, septum's 14 gauge, tongue is done usually at 14 gauge or larger. Most oral piercings are done at 16 gauge or larger. Nipple piercings, 14, navel's 14. Genitalia, anywhere from 14 to 10 gauge, depending on what you specifically are getting pierced and what you need as far as the anatomy. That said, the other part is the width of the jewelry. And when we're talking about width, we're talking about the space between the center of the ring to the other side of the center of the ring. Or with barbells or curved barbells, we are talking about from one ball, the inside of one ball to the inside of the other ball. With labret studs from the disc to the inside of the ball. When you're sizing, usually when we pierce with jewelry, depending on what piercing it is, we usually pierce a little bit on the large size because we want to allow that extra room for inflammation and to give kind of an area where your body can easily discharge the lymph discharge it does during the healing process. Once they heal, they can be a little bit more snug. The only time I would say not to is if you're putting anything circular into a large piercing. For example, like a nipple piercing, where one side of the piercing to the other side could be 3/8 of an inch to a 1/2 inch. You don't want to put something in there that's 1/2 inch because the curvature will be too tight and it will cause issues. I have been seeing the same problem with nostril piercings with these people that want these really, really tiny, 1/4 inch or 3/16 rings, and it'll cause indentation, scarring, and all kinds of other problems. So whenever in doubt, ask your piercer. Now let's move on to the types of jewelry. Now I'm going to go through some of the more common pieces of jewelry that you're going to encounter if you are collecting piercings. The first one being the captive bead ring. What this is a ring with a segment out of it that the ball snaps out of. And I did do a video on how to properly take these in and out, which you might want to check out on our page or channel. And basically the tension on both sides of that holds this ball in place, and there's two little dimples or holes on the ball that lock it, that the ends sit in, like so. The next type, they're called fixed bead rings. With fixed beads, the ball is actually attached on one side. So generally when you take them out, they look kind of like that. There's a little indentation on the one side of the ball that this end sits in. And if you're ever going to change them, and I'll probably do a video on this eventually, you always want to bend them like a corkscrew. That way you can keep it in true. The other type is called a seamless ring. Basically pretty much exactly like a beaded, but does not have, or a fixed bead ring, but does not have any type of ball or other form of closure. It's basically the same way, bend it. Now there's different variations on the cavity bead rings, such as the segment ring, where a segment actually sits in there. There's also various different types of closures. There's also different shapes, like ovals, almost a triangular style that was used really primarily in navals about 20 years ago, in various different shapes, size, and etc. But they're all basically the same, and they all work basically the same. Next up, we're going to talk about nostril screws. And nostril screws is basically kind of, I always describe it as a question mark bent in half. It's basically got a curvature that sits on the inside of your nose. It's just one solid piece of wire with a head on one side that sits outside the body, and then that curvature of wire sits on the inside. So with these, basically inserting and outserting can be kind of complicated, but once you get used to it, it's pretty easy. They can be adjusted and tightened to make it easier, or make it more secure, and also to make it more easy to remove and place the jewelry. L-bends are basically the same process, except instead of having the curvature, it's a straight line. Now we get into threaded jewelry, which is more common now than it ever has been. The most standard or basic would be the straight barbell. Both ends normally do come unscrewed. There are two types of threading that you're going to encounter. The first type being internally threaded, which this one is, which means that the post does not have any threading on it, and it is somewhat hollow, and that the ball has a little piece of threading that comes off of it and threads into the post. So the ball is kind of like a little screw. There is also externally threaded, where the ball is actually kind of more like a nut and threads. There's a piece of threading on the end, and the ball threads onto, like this, but the ball threads onto the post. Next style would be the circular barbell, which is this style right here, or a horseshoe, they're commonly called. Basically what it is just a barbell bent into a circular. Another common one is the curved barbell, which is basically a barbell that has been bent or curved so that it is more of a banana shape. And then the last one we're going to talk about is labret studs. Labret studs were originally designed for labret piercings, but they have greatly increasing usage for ear piercings, especially, and pretty much anything that's in the mouth that protrudes from the mouth, except lip piercings, which you want to do a ring. But basically what they are is they have a flat disc on one side, and the other side is a threaded ball. Usually the disc side is fixed, but sometimes it isn't. Just like any type of barbell, there's internally threaded and externally threaded. There's also push pin, which is really popular, where it doesn't have any threading at all. They can be used for a large variety of different types of piercings. So that's some of the basics. Whenever in doubt, you're not sure what you have or what have you, stop by, have me take a look at it, or stop by your piercer and have them take a look at it and give you an idea. Especially if you're ordering online, because nothing sucks worse than getting something and then realizing it's the wrong shape, the wrong size, or the wrong type. Other than that, you guys have a good day and happy piercing.